Hi, everyone. This is Kylie Wyatt with another episode of the 101 Thoughts podcast. Today I'm here with Dr. Todd Sevig to talk about help-seeking behavior among college students. Dr. Todd Sevig is the director of the Counseling and Psychological Services, or CAPS program here at the University of Michigan. He earned his master's and doctoral degrees from The Ohio State University and has been the director of the CAPS program here since 2001. He has authored and co-authored numerous articles and chapters on student mental health and well-being, and he is also the co-author of the book Integrating Spirituality into Multicultural Counseling. He serves on multiple boards and committees dedicated to student mental health and is a multi-award winner for achievement in this field. He is passionate about, quote, developing new cutting-edge ways to deliver clinical services on campus and creating campus-wide efforts and initiatives around student mental health and emotional wellness. Dr. Sevig, thank you for being here. How are you?
I am doing great. I really appreciate the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Of course. I'm really excited that you're here to join me. So like I said, I just have a couple kind of guiding questions. Generally just about mental health among college students in general, the different resources available here to students on campus, and then also student use of those resources. Probably some of the big things we'll talk about today.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so I guess my first big question here is, how would you define help-seeking behavior? And maybe if you could talk a little bit about what that means to you.
Yeah, that's a great question to kick it off. I don't want to get overly complicated here, but there's at least three main layers to this question, issue, and how we think about it. One is a very observable fact that in all mental health settings, the clientele, if you will, is always 2/3 female and 1/3 male. Now, we've been able to make some inroads and do some different things here at Michigan. Our client population in any 1 year is approximately 60-40 split. But the fact is that this has been a hard thing for mental health professionals over the year, including college counseling centers, where most populations are approximately 50-50, men and women, but help-seeking clients at any counseling center is more in that 60-40 or 65-35 range. So then it begs the question, why the heck is that? Why are men receiving help less? Why are they seeking help less? So that gets into the second layer of this, what's underneath that fact, if you will. And then there's 25 layers in that second layer. So I'll just start talking and then you can interrupt me when you want to. But, it has everything to do with how we're socialized, with the environment that we are brought up in, and the messages we receive. And that's been my energy, my whole career, even before I was director, is this energy around what does it mean to ask for help? Any kind of help. Doesn't have to be mental health help. And this narrative in this country, in a lot of, quote, Western countries, that you have a weakness or there's something wrong with you or it's not cool to ask for help. And that is so wrong. I'm here to tell you, Kylie, that is so wrong. All of us need help. None of us can do things on our own. That's just inane. That's ridiculous. But we are, as soon as we are on that playground when we're 6 years old, somehow we start getting these messages. Other messages we receive, of course, are around, ism, sexism, racism, heterosexism. You're just inundated with these messages that aren't helpful to our mental health. But to bring it back to your question. So I think what's going on is a man can feel like I'm kind of struggling here. And yet it's so hard to ask for help. And so what we've tried to do as a counseling center is basically attack and combat those messages that aren't helpful and replace them with better messages. For instance, it's actually a sign of strength to ask for help and to receive help. When we feed back all the stats on campus, we tend to really accentuate that a lot of people, guys included, ask for help. So another sublayer is people of color in this country. You know, the effects of racism run really deep. And one of them is that if you're a student of color on this campus, the minute you ask for help, it means that you're less than and that you shouldn't be here and that you should go to Wayne State or Eastern Michigan. And that applies both in terms of seeking help for mental health reasons, but also in the classroom. For some students of color, it's actually very difficult to go up to some old white guy professor and say, I don't know how to do this equation. Because the narrative is filled with racism that, oh, you shouldn't be here. You're only here because of affirmative action. And so I guess I'll stop talking here in a sec. But one way to think about it is all the stuff that is happening before that student crosses the threshold, either physically or now virtually, to see one of us. There's a whole lifetime of experiences that have led to that decision to cross the threshold. And what we're trying to do is combat the narrative, but make it easier, reduce the barriers, have a diverse staff, because all these things make it easier for students.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that ties perfectly really into the whole concept of stigma, right? And that was definitely something that stuck out to me about what you just mentioned. That kind of, unspoken societal rule that there is that, there's danger in asking for help.
Or that there's something wrong with you, or that you have a deficit, or you're crazy. Now, thankfully, at least in my lifetime, this has changed. Stigma is a lot less than when I was coming up and learning the profession and so forth. So that's good. It's still present in various communities as well as everybody. And the help-seeking behavior and the stats, I think, reflect that. But it is less. But that is an issue where the environment is actually kind of sick and not so much the person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess kind of one of the really big questions I had for you concerning, stigma and how it relates to that help-seeking behavior we've been talking about, especially here on campus, is, maybe what have you noticed in the last, 19-ish years that you've been working here concerning those trends with stigma and help-seeking behavior? What kind of changes have you noticed here on campus?
Well, I hate to say this, but some of it hasn't changed. We see less international students, for instance. Some of the students coming from various parts of the world have grown up with the absence of even the concept of mental health. So why would you ask for help for something that doesn't even exist? There's just something wrong with you. So I haven't seen a whole lot of changes with international students. Like I said earlier, we have made some inroads into increasing the number of men asking for help. We've done some outreach efforts, some videos, stuff on our website, talked with men. So I think there's thankfully some change there. And then with students of color, a lot of change. Now, students of color is, of course, not just one group. It's a whole bunch of people.
Right.
But that's where I think, nothing about me, but our staff comes in. So, about half of us are people of color, various races and ethnicities within that group of staff. And so they exist. We put our faces on the website. That's why we do that. We do outreach. We connect with student groups. We get out there. We write about this. So I have seen an increase in that. And so we're right now, I think last year, when we think of the students of color, the students coming into CAPS approximately exactly reflect the population of the university. So I think that's what we're shooting for here, where men and women and transgender or non-binary identified match the student population, where race matches the student population. So that's what I think we're shooting for, because we have to assume that mental and emotional health issues affect all of us, and that some of the differences come from our, at times, unhealthy environment filled with violence and racism and sexism and heterosexism. So, I think that's why we see some of the variations right now. But I think that's the goal. I think that's the
goal. Well, I mean, you perfectly actually answered my next question. I'm really glad we've got to talk a little bit about, the goals of the CAPS program here on campus. I think it's really clear that you guys are dedicated to, pushing for inclusivity and to eliminate that stigma, really encourage that help-seeking behavior. It's clear that that's a really big goal of all of yours here. I guess my next question is, what is your favorite thing about the CAPS program here on campus?
Well, I love my profession. I love my job. I love being here. I've never thought of it that way.
Maybe, the thing you're most proud about with this program here.
I don't know about that. But what flashed through my head was this. And it's nothing about me or us in CAPS. It's about our student population. You and your 48,000 closest friends. And it's this. And this is a fact, data, anecdotal, throughout, that repeats itself year after year since we started keeping track of it. And that is this, that the number one reason why students come to CAPS, hear about CAPS, think about coming to CAPS is a friend, not our website, not a faculty member, not some fancy ass email that I send out to the student community. It's friends. Now think about that. How cool is that, Kylie? Because that will help decrease stigma, that will normalize help-seeking behavior instead of making it abnormal. And it's a testament to our student body, student advocacy, student energy. When I first came here 30 years ago, no one would be writing or doing a class project on mental health. Back in those days, we were like fighting to have recognition, like, oh, we're here, mental health is important. And no one really listened. But it's so cool right now. I hate to say it this way maybe, but your generation, much more knowledgeable, much more smart, much more open around these issues. And that's a phenomenal change, Kylie, from my perspective.
Right.
As an old guy. Maybe it's not night and day, but it's really close to night and day. Are we done? Do we rest on our laurels and not do anything? Absolutely not. Because there are, when we think about gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender clients, some students of color, some international students, there's still some stigma reduction work to do. We've got to normalize this within certain communities. Some guys, there's still work to do, but man, we have made a ton of progress in this regard.
Yeah.
In the fraternities right now, last 3 years, there is now a designated role, a mental health chair that's designated to help with mental health. That's cool.
That's awesome. It's really a testament, I think, to, like we were talking about earlier, those trends on campus. It's a testament to the normalization of just the discussion about mental health. And obviously, like you mentioned, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I would definitely say it, speaks volumes about just how much has changed in the last 10, 15 years too, which is really incredible.
It's rewarding. It warms my heart. I know it doesn't apply to everybody, but my career, whether it's more of the academic, the scientific, all those things you mentioned, we write about and think about, but also as a practitioner, but also as an administrator, just to keep this going. Because what that means is we're on our way to becoming a healthy community. And so, we're talking about students, but the other part of the community, faculty, right? They play a really important role in the normalizing of the messages. So, for instance, I work super hard to get a statement on the syllabus around CAPS and mental health services. We did the faculty toolkit last year where we basically said, look, you can do this. in the classroom, in the studio, in the lab. You can do mental health. It doesn't have to be anything big and fancy. Really helps those messages. So when we try to put all these parts together, the role of faculty, student advocacy, students supporting each other, reducing barriers as an agency of CAPS to help seeking, it's trying to get all the wheels going in the same direction, or some kind of metaphor like that.
So how do you think the mental health resources on campus, specifically the CAPS program, have changed maybe in the last, say, 10 years? Do you think maybe the focus has shifted? Have you had to maybe change the way you run things?
Yeah, a few things come to mind, 10 or 15 or 5, but probably, so the biggest thing that gets the headlines is the quantity. So the number of students asking for help has increased by a lot. Now, you can't have one without the other. You can't attack stigma and reduce barriers, help faculty to help students without creating an increase. So what I like to say is this is exactly what we wanted. This is not a problem, people. This is exactly what we've been working for, the 50 years of the counseling center profession. The fact is, though, that then you need to resource differently to meet that demand. So we have increased. When I became director, we had 16 staff members. And now with even the announcement on Friday, additional staff for CAPS, we'll be at 46 staff. That change in both demand and then resources to meet that demand, that's probably the biggest change. At the heart of what we do, I would say has not changed one iota. I don't even know what an iota is, but my mom used to say that word. It hasn't changed a bit. The values, student-centered. When we wake up in the morning, all we're thinking about is student mental health. We love faculty and staff, but we don't really care about that. So we only think about student mental health. And the other change here that I've seen, definitely when I first came 30 years ago and now, is this. Changing from not just trying to change the world one person at a time, meaning working individually in therapy. We keep doing that, but what we've added there's different terms for it, Kylie, but environmental interventions, culture interventions, climate interventions. At a very specific level, we call that wing of our work outreach, education, prevention. So things like having technology work for us instead of getting in the way. So our CAPS app for smartphones, Stress Busters app, obviously the website. We have a self-help section on our website. This thing this year called Silver Cloud. It's a self-guided treatment modules, if you will. We do a whole host of suicide prevention work, messages of hope, tiles, QPR workshops. We go and talk with faculty. We send reports around campus. So that's probably the biggest change is the increase. Well, one of the biggest changes is the increase in that wing of our work. So we don't just do therapy.
Shifting into maybe a new topic, we've talked a lot about, or you've mentioned a good couple of times, barriers to that help-seeking behavior that you see on campus. So what, in your opinion, are some of those major barriers or reasons why students are maybe hesitant to reach out, maybe don't know about the CAPS program? What are maybe some of those biggest barriers that you've noticed?
So a mixture of kind of conceptual and then more obvious concrete things.
Yeah.
The one is what we talked about before. I think actually the biggest barrier is that internal decision making that any of us makes before we actually come to CAPS, if you will. I have a quick story to tell you, and some of this is not just stigma, is a lack of knowledge if you haven't thought about it before.
Right.
Some of us have grown up in families where it's not talked about. Sometimes there's a lack of knowledge, which is why we have screening instruments on our website anonymously. Just write down what's going on, and then we'll compare your scores to people who have anxiety to people who don't have a lot of anxiety. See where you fall. And some of this, so the quick story is this. I got stung by a bee a few years ago. And
Okay.
it wasn't a normal sting. Like I've gotten stung before, whatever, it goes away. Well, it was in my leg, and I got home and my leg started to balloon up, like really
Oh no.
swell. Like I was
Yeah.
scared. So I called the ER and they say, "Oh, it's fine. Just put some baking soda on it." And I'm like, my leg is about to fall off here. But lo and behold, I put baking soda on and the swelling goes down and I'm fine.
Oh,
So I bring this up because I don't think a lot of us have a lot of knowledge around mental health. And so we don't always know, okay, I feel bad, but do I need to go to CAPS? Do I need to see a professional?
mhm.
Or can I just go out with a friend? Or can I do a Zoom call with a friend? Or can I read something on a website? It's very mysterious. So what we try to do in CAPS is reduce that mystery. We were very clear, even if you just talk to us one time, just to get something checked out,
Yeah.
there's a lot of value in that. Before coming to CAPS stuff, your personal family history, your cultural history, all those messages, not knowing if what I'm feeling needs treatment or not. I think that's a big cluster. But the other thing is this. I think it's been very important for us, at least students tell us, to have that diverse staff. Sometimes the
Mm.
only thing that makes it easier for me to cross the threshold is I can see somebody who looks like me, similar experiences in their life.
Mm.
So that's another one. And then the third thing is this. We got to make it low wait time. So, we put on our website, we change it every day, like how long it takes to have a scheduled appointment in CAPS. You can always see us on an urgent basis, same day. But wait time to have that scheduled first appointment, we try to keep it low because
Mm.
there's only 16 weeks in the semester, for goodness sake. So if the
Yeah.
wait is too long, it doesn't match the needs. So it's fine, for instance, to have the Department of Psychiatry routinely has a 2 to 3 month wait to get in.
Wow.
Private
Okay.
practice can widely vary to a couple of weeks to 2 months. But we try to keep it low to meet student needs. That's the third thing. And then, I'd say the fourth thing is, what is treatment all about? Most of us don't really know. We see movies and books about it. All of us probably know that one person who saw a therapist and it was a miserable experience. Sometimes parents drag us to therapists when we're in middle school and it's just an awful experience. And so all
Yeah.
these things kind of get in the way. So I don't know. Those are the main ones as I talk with students that I've seen. Obviously we
Right.
try to reduce all that, but I think it's still there for some people.
Yeah, it's interesting how you mentioned a lot of, non-physical concepts. Like we've been talking about, the stigma is a big reason, but, all of those physical concepts are also a really interesting thing to consider, at least for me, coming in here as a freshman. That's a lot of something I'd never considered before, especially being, a white female. I had never really thought about those more physical barriers to, why students reach out and seek help. So it's definitely, I think, a really important concept to think about. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. We've been talking about this a little bit. We've been talking about the importance of diversity and diversity inclusion within these programs. But if you could elaborate a little bit more on what ways the CAPS program maybe targets those specific demographics of students that maybe do experience more of those barriers. What is the program doing to encourage them to seek help?
We do probably three things that I can think of at least right now. I think the biggest one is that engagement that I mentioned earlier, our outreach engagement, our staff going to that monthly meeting of the Black Student Union and talking about mental health, talking about CAPS, and a whole bunch of other student groups that we go to. That's one way. The second thing is to be very public as we can be. It's hard to get any information out to our large campus, but around who we are, what we do, and what we stand for. So if you look, anyone who looks on our website, again, you'll see a meet the staff with who we are. We write a little bit about what we do. We're not going to put you on the couch 3 times a week and analyze the heck out of you. We're not going to do that. We have a section on our website called Navigating a Complex World, which tries to give voice to voices that we don't always listen to. So that's another way. I think reducing the mystery, diverse staff, but then that coupled with going and actually talking with students in this outreach capacity. And then really being keenly aware, again, that the number one reason why students come to CAPS is because of a friend. So really, augmenting. That's a sign of a healthy community. So really augmenting that. Word of mouth, give the messages. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess the last big question I have for you after, talking all about the help-seeking behavior of the students here, what the CAPS program is doing to encourage that, what you've noticed is maybe a barrier to that. I guess my last big question for you is, what do you think could be done maybe on a university level, on a societal level even, to further educate students about mental health before they're entering college or, even right at the beginning of their university years? Because as you mentioned, there are so many students who have never experienced even a discussion about mental health before. So what do you think needs to be done?
I like this question because it's kind of like if I were king of the world. So 2 or 3 things come to mind. And one, we had an effort that we started just this year to address that. It's nothing about me, but we have a great creative staff. We sit down mostly in the summer when it's slower and we think about the quote, big issues, big problems, big challenges, big opportunities. We identify them. What do we see this year? And then we come up with some creative ideas to address it. So we published a first year student guide around emotional wellness, emotional health, mental health just this year. It got a little funky getting it out to people because of the pandemic, but it went through 13 or 14 major issues that first year students experience with some tips to address them. So that's a very concrete, it's a product, it's a thing. I'd like all first year students to see it. We can do it electronically. We have a few hard copies, but
yeah.
So I guess that's an example, Kylie, of that can be very big issue, big picture, somewhat conceptual, but then providing tools, resources. My profession of psychology has a history of being kind of withholding, like, oh, you have to come to my office and pay me $100 an hour, to get the information. That's not what we're about in CAPS. We're a student counseling center. I like to say we're the students counseling center. We only exist for you. We don't exist for me. We don't exist for Fleming, all the administrators in the Fleming building. We only exist for students. So tools, resources, easy, not just individual counseling. Because our job, when we wake up, we think about only student mental health. We also think about all 48,000 students. Now, not every student needs or wants counseling, obviously, right? So we see about 5,000 students a year just for individual counseling, but we also want to pay attention to the 43,000 other students that could use some help, could use some pointers, resources. That's one thing when they get here. I do think, I don't know what you all think, and I'd love to hear what other students think, but I think a little, so we make you do an online module around alcohol and sexual assault issues. I'd love to have a mental health module.
Yeah.
Easy, fun to do. I know not everybody would do it probably, but easy, fun. It could help a little bit. And then the biggest thing, and I don't know if this will happen in my lifetime or not, but I would love to see some changes in our academic environment.
Yeah.
I think we are doing things that actually harm students' mental health. And I think we now know more than we used to around how some of these things are harmful, and they don't have to be there. And you can still be academically rigorous and leaders and best and the smartest people in the world. You can still keep all that going and be mentally healthy. This environment where we, what's the phrase, breed competition. It's not really necessary. You can still have high academic standards, but not foster this competition. So that's just an example. I just think some of our environments, in those classroom settings, which is partly why we did the faculty toolkit. That's what I would say. Well, the last thing, is, I guess it draws from what I said earlier. Just increased knowledge, whether it's screening or, like, it's okay to feel bad. Like, life is hard. Life is hard. It's okay to feel bad. There's nothing wrong. You don't need treatment for normal feeling bad. I have bad days too. But also giving the companion message that if that's going on a little too long, don't sit on it. Ask for help. It's a sign of strength to ask for help. It's cool to do mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And it's really evident, I think, in everything that you read about this program here that, like you said, you want to make talking about mental health cool, and you want to, foster that discussion, which I personally think is awesome. So thank you so much for being here and having this discussion with me. I think, everyone who ends up listening to this will get a really, really valuable message out of it, especially since it's so applicable, especially during a pandemic. I think more than ever, mental health is so, so important right now. So thank you for being here and having this conversation with me. It was amazing.
Well, you're so welcome, and thank you for your energy on it.
Of course.
It was actually a lot of fun doing this, so I appreciate it.
Of course.